The heavy oak door of the Savannah Elementary School cafeteria was cool against Kim Jae-ho's palm, but his hand burned. White knuckles. Tendons standing out like steel cables beneath skin that had forgotten how to relax. He stood there, 6 feet of controlled stillness in a hallway that smelled of industrial cleaner and old cafeteria grease. And for the first time in 4 years, the man from Seoul came back online. The metallic taste flooded his mouth. Copper, adrenaline, the taste of decisions that couldn't be undone. Through the 1-inch crack in the door, he could hear it. Muffled laughter, the kind that has teeth. The scrape of a chair. A high-pitched voice saying something he couldn't make out, followed by an eruption of giggles that made his jaw lock. In his other hand, the insulated lunch bag. 3 days of planning, her favorite dumplings, the surprise he timed to the minute, felt like it weighed 50 pounds. Through the crack, his world stopped. Zola, standing in the center of the cafeteria like a statue, her small body frozen in that way prey animals freeze when they know running will only make it worse. 3 boys circled her. The leader, sun-bleached hair, a confidence that comes from never being told no, stood directly in front of her. Kim Jae-ho watched as the boy raised his hands to his face and pulled at the corners of his eyes, stretching them into cruel slits. The other 2 boys erupted in laughter. One of them started making sounds, sharp, clicking nonsense that bore no resemblance to any language but was meant to wound nonetheless. Zola didn't move, didn't cry, didn't fight back. She just stood there in the purple dress he had ironed that morning, the one with the sunflowers she said made her feel fancy, staring at a point on the wall behind them, using a survival tactic Kim Jae-ho recognized from his own childhood. If you don't react, maybe they'll get bored. Maybe they'll stop. They didn't stop. A girl with blonde pigtails appeared from the left, pointing at Zola's carefully packed lunch, the kimbap he had rolled at 5 a.m., the strawberries he had cut into perfect hearts. "Ew, what is that? It smells like feet." The girl's voice carried across the cafeteria, and more heads turned, more eyes locked onto his daughter. One of the boys kicked at Zola's lunch, sending it skidding across the floor. Kim Jae-ho's free hand moved to the door handle. Every instinct from Seoul screamed at him to act, to move, to cross that cafeteria in 5 strides and show these children what real fear looked like. His body remembered how to be a weapon. His mind cataloged exits, threats, the precise amount of pressure needed to make a grown man's voice climb 3 octaves. But then Zola's eyes found his. Across 30 feet of cafeteria space, through the chaos and the cruelty, his daughter saw him, and the look on her face stopped him colder than any bullet ever had. It wasn't relief. It wasn't hope. It was terror. Her eyes, those beautiful brown eyes that used to dance when he read her bedtime stories, went wide. She gave the tiniest shake of her head, a silent plea, "Don't. Please, Appa, don't." Because she knew that if he interfered, if he made a scene, if he played the protector today, tomorrow would be worse. Next week would be unbearable. Kim Jae-ho's hand fell away from the door handle. 5 feet from Zola, leaning against a support pillar with the casual indifference of a man watching paint dry, stood Mr. Sterling. Khakis, polo shirt, lanyard with his ID badge dangling across his chest, phone in hand, thumb scrolling, eyes down. He looked up once, a brief glance at the scene unfolding directly in his line of sight, then looked back down at his screen. Not a word, not a movement, just a conscious, calculated decision to do nothing. That's when Kim Jae-ho understood. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a momentary lapse in supervision. This was a routine. His daughter had been surviving this alone, and the people paid to protect her had chosen comfort over courage. The thought moved through his mind with the cold clarity of a blade sliding into flesh. I have buried men for less, but if I move now, I lose her forever. So he stood there, paralyzed by the same helplessness his daughter felt, watching her soldier through something no 9-year-old should have to endure. And in that moment, Kim Jae-ho made a different kind of decision. Not the loud kind, not the violent kind, the patient kind. The kind that dismantles empires brick by brick until there's nothing left but dust. But to understand why a man who once commanded an empire now stood paralyzed by a children's cafeteria door, you need to know what brought him to Savannah in the first place. And it starts with a girl who refused to cry. 4 years earlier, Kim Jae-ho made a choice that saved his life but nearly destroyed his soul. Seoul, 4 years ago. Rain on bulletproof glass. Kim Jae-ho stood in a penthouse office 37 floors above the Gangnam district. watching the city lights blur into streaks of neon through water that never seemed to stop falling. Behind him, 3 men in tailored suits waited for his decision. They didn't speak. They didn't fidget. They simply existed in the gravitational pull of his authority, the way planets orbit a sun. On the mahogany desk between them sat a manila folder. Inside it, a name, a location, a timeline, the kind of information that would end a career, destroy a family, shift the balance of power in ways that would ripple through Seoul's underground for a decade. All Kim Jae-ho had to do was nod, just once, and the machinery of his empire would grind forward with the inevitability of tides. He had nodded so many times before. But that night, standing at the window with rain drumming against glass that could stop a bullet but couldn't stop exhaustion, Kim Jae-ho realized something that terrified him more than any rival ever had. He couldn't remember the last time someone had looked at him without calculation, without fear, without the weight of what he could take away pressing down on every smile, every word, every breath in his presence. "Burn it," he said. The 3 men exchanged glances. One of them, the youngest, still hungry, leaned forward. "Sir, if we don't act, they will. You know this." Kim Jae-ho turned from the window. His reflection in the glass showed a man who looked 42 but felt centuries older. "Then let them. I'm done." He didn't leave because he was afraid. He left because he was tired of being feared. 3 weeks later, Kim Jae-ho landed in Savannah, Georgia, with 2 suitcases and a bank account that could buy half the city. The humidity hit him first, thick, drowning air that tasted like salt and flowers and earth that remembered older names than the ones on the street signs. The contrast was absolute. Seoul had been all glass and steel and marble floors that echoed with the click of expensive shoes. Savannah was oak trees dripping Spanish moss, cobblestones that predated the empire he'd left behind, and a pace of life that moved like the Savannah River. Slow, inevitable, carving its path through stone one patient century at a time. He bought a house in the historic district. Not the biggest, not the flashiest, but old, solid. The kind of house that had survived Sherman's March and 3 centuries of hurricanes and still stood with a dignity that had nothing to do with violence. The realtor, a woman named Patricia who talked about Southern charm and entertaining spaces, kept calling it a property. Kim Jae-ho kept thinking of it as a fortress. Not the kind meant to keep enemies out, the kind meant to keep the past from following him in. He started a real estate company, JH Development. On paper, it was an investment firm specializing in affordable housing and urban renewal projects. In practice, it was penance. He built homes for families who had been priced out of the neighborhoods their grandparents had built. He renovated community centers in parts of Savannah where venture capital feared to tread. Every foundation he poured, every roof he raised, was a brick in a wall between who he had been and who was desperately trying to become. But penance doesn't fill the silence. His house was 4,200 square feet. For one man, it felt like a mausoleum. He ate dinner at a table built for 10, using china he'd bought because the interior designer said it completed the aesthetic. He would spend an hour preparing elaborate Korean meals, galbi, japchae, kimchi jjigae, that filled the kitchen with the smell of home, then eat in silence, the only sound the scrape of chopsticks against porcelain and the ticking of a grandfather clock he'd inherited from the previous owner. Some nights, he would set 2 places at the table, just to see what it looked like. Then he would clear the second setting before sitting down, feeling foolish in a way that Seoul had never allowed him to feel. His mornings became rituals of control, precision against the chaos of emptiness. 6 a.m. exactly. Wake, not to an alarm, his body simply knew. 32 years of discipline doesn't forget, even when you want it to. 6 a.m., green tea. Water heated to exactly 175 degrees Fahrenheit. Any hotter and it scalds the leaves, turns the flavor bitter. He would pour with the care of a man diffusing a bomb, watching steam curl up from the cup like ghosts of decisions he'd made. 6:15 a.m., the newspaper. Not digital, physical. The Savannah Morning News delivered to his doorstep, the paper already damp with humidity by the time he retrieved it. He would read it in a leather chair positioned exactly 18 inches from the window, the morning light falling across the pages at the same angle every day. Local news, city council meetings, high school football scores. A world so far removed from Seoul it might as well have been a different planet. 7 a.m., breakfast. 2 eggs over medium, toast, wheat, no butter. Orange juice in a crystal glass because even in exile, some standards remained. He would cut his eggs with surgical precision, the yolk breaking at exactly the same moment each morning, golden and perfect and meaningless. The routine was armor. As long as he could control the temperature of his tea, the angle of his newspaper, the exact moment the yolk broke, he could convince himself he wasn't drowning in the quiet. But armor cracks. Then came the night that shattered his carefully constructed solitude. A charity gala at the Savannah Convention Center, one of those rubber chicken fundraisers where real estate developers were expected to smile, write checks, and pretend they cared about literacy programs and after-school initiatives. Kim Jae-ho attended because Patricia said it was good for business. He stayed because leaving early would invite questions. He was standing by the dessert table, holding a glass of champagne he had no intention of drinking, wearing a smile he'd practiced in the mirror that morning. The smile that said, "I belong here. I am harmless." And that's when he saw her. A girl, no more than 7 years old, with intricate braids and a purple dress that looked like someone had tried very hard to make her feel special. She was reorganizing the dessert table, moving brownies to one side, cookies to the other, creating order where adults had left chaos. Her face held the kind of concentration Kim Jae-ho recognized. The look of someone who believed that if they could just control one small thing, maybe the rest of the world would stop feeling so dangerous. She looked up, their eyes met, and she asked the question that broke him, "Why are you pretending to smile?" Her name was Zola Williams, and she saw through him like no one ever had. Kim Jae-ho didn't answer her immediately. He couldn't, because no one, not his lieutenants in Seoul, not his business rivals, not the federal investigators who had once spent 3 months trying to prove things they suspected but couldn't name, had ever looked at him and seen through the performance so completely. The girl stood there, 7 years old in a purple dress that was slightly too big, tilting her head like she was examining a puzzle. Her braids were intricate, the kind that took patience and hands that cared, but one of them was coming loose at the bottom. She noticed him noticing, and her hand shot up to fix it. A reflexive gesture that spoke of surveillance. Always monitoring, always correcting, always presenting an acceptable surface. "You don't have to answer," she said, her voice carrying the careful politeness of a child who had learned that adults appreciate small courtesies. "My caseworker says I asked too many questions." Caseworker. The word landed like a stone in still water. Kim Jae-ho crouched down, bringing himself to her eye level. Up close, he could see the soldier posture she maintained, shoulders back, chin level, feet planted like she was bracing for impact. He recognized it. He had taught men to stand that way. "I'm pretending," he said quietly, "because I don't know how to smile real anymore. I forgot." Zola considered this with the seriousness of a judge deliberating a verdict. "That's sad. But at least you're honest about it. Most people just get mad when I notice." "How often do you notice?" "Always." She said it matter-of-factly, the way someone might say they were good at math or liked strawberries. "People pretend a lot, especially at these things." She gestured vaguely at the gala, the donors in cocktail attire, the speeches about giving back, the charity auction where people bid thousands on vacation packages to feel virtuous. They smile and say nice things, but they're counting minutes until they can leave, like you. Kim Jae-ho felt something crack in his chest. "What's your name?" "Zola Williams. I'm here because Mrs. Patterson runs the children's home, and she says events like this are opportunities to be seen." The way she said it, mimicking the exact cadence of an adult's voice, made it clear she understood the transaction. She was a prop, a visual reminder of the good work being done. "I'm Kim Jae-ho." "I know. You're the man who builds houses for people who can't afford them. Mrs. Patterson told us before we came. She said if any of the donors talk to us, we should be grateful and polite." Zola paused, then added with devastating sincerity, "Were you polite enough?" "I can try harder." That's when Kim Jae-ho knew he was looking at a mirror from 30 years ago. A child who had learned that survival meant performance. That safety was something you earned by being useful, acceptable, invisible when necessary, and visible only on command. He learned her story in pieces over the next hour, standing by that dessert table while the gala swirled around them like a river parting around a stone. Orphaned at 6 when her grandmother, her only living relative, died of a stroke in the kitchen of their apartment. Zola had been at school. She came home to flashing lights and yellow tape and a social worker with kind eyes and terrible news. 3 foster homes in 2 years. Not because she was difficult, because she was too quiet, too watchful, doesn't bond well. She had learned that attachment was a liability. The first family returned her after 6 months because they were moving and it wasn't a good time. The second family lasted 4 months before they decided to focus on their biological children. The third family kept her for 8 months, the longest stretch, but then their circumstances changed. She didn't cry when they moved her. That's what the file would later tell Kim Jae-ho, the one he obtained through Detective Miller 3 weeks after that gala. Every transition note said the same thing. Child remained calm, no behavioral issues, cooperative. Zola had learned to make herself useful. She organized things. She cleaned without being asked. She never requested second helpings. She made herself small, manageable, easy, hoping that if she could just be good enough, maybe the next home would keep her. "Do you like living at Mrs. Patterson's?" Kim Jae-ho asked. Zola's pause told him everything. "It's fine. Everyone's nice. There are rules, but rules make sense. Better than the last place." "What was wrong with the last place?" She looked at him, measuring something. Then, "They had a dog. A big one. It was nice to me, but the dad said it was getting too attached, and that made things complicated. So I had to go." Her voice never wavered. She recited it like a weather report, sunny with a chance of abandonment. Kim Jae-ho felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not pity. Recognition. This child understood the cost of being seen, the danger of mattering too much. The adoption process took 6 months. Not because of bureaucracy. Kim Jae-ho's lawyers handled that with the efficiency of a military operation. It took 6 months because he needed Zola to choose him as much as he was choosing her. He visited every Saturday, always at 2 p.m., always bringing something small, a book, a puzzle, a box of colored pencils. Never toys that screamed, "I'm trying to buy your affection." Just quiet offerings that said, "I see you. I'm not going anywhere." On the third visit, Zola asked him why he kept coming back. "Because I said I would," Kim Jae-ho replied. "People say a lot of things." "I know. That's why I'm showing you instead." It wasn't love at first sight. It was recognition. 2 people who understood what it meant to wear a mask. 2 people who were tired of performing. 2 people who needed permission to be tired. The first 6 months in his house were an education in vulnerability neither of them expected. Kim Jae-ho learned to braid hair via YouTube at 2 a.m. His fingers, hands that had once signed orders that moved millions, fumbling with tiny elastics and synthetic hair ties. He watched tutorial videos from women with patient voices, rewinding the same 10-second clip 17 times until he could execute a basic 3-strand braid without it unraveling. Zola taught herself Korean phrases from a library book, practicing in her room when she thought he couldn't hear. He would walk past her door and catch fragments. "안녕하세요. 감사합니다. 사랑해. Hello. Thank you. I love you." She mispronounced half of them, but the effort made his throat tight. One morning, 3 months in, he found her packing her backpack with meticulous care, every book aligned, every pencil sharpened, her lunch organized with a precision that broke his heart. "Zola?" She looked up and he saw it, the fear, the waiting for the other shoe to drop. "Come here." She approached like someone walking to a verdict. Kim Jae-ho knelt down, taking her small hands in his scarred ones. "In this house, you are a queen. You bow to no one. Not to me, not to anyone. Do you understand? But what if I mess up? Then you mess up. Queens mess up. It doesn't make them less royal. What if you change your mind? I won't. But what if?" "Zola." He waited until she met his eyes. "I spent 40 years building walls. You're the first person I've ever wanted inside them. I'm not changing my mind." Their routines became sacred. Breakfast at the kitchen table, sun streaming through windows that overlooked a garden, Zola had insisted they plant together. Lunchbox packing each morning, her choosing what she wanted, him showing her how to wrap kimbap, cut fruit, balance flavors. Evening walks through the historic district where Zola would narrate elaborate stories about the houses they passed. That one's a castle for a retired pirate queen. That one's a library for cats who've learned to read. That one's sad because it misses having children. For 2 years it worked. The fortress held. Then 6 weeks ago, Zola came home from school and asked a question that made Kim Jae-ho's blood run cold. "Appa, can we make my hair normal?" Normal. The most dangerous word a child can learn. Before we continue, I need to ask something. This story took days to research and script. If you're feeling this right now, that tightness in your chest for Zola, please hit the like button and subscribe. I pour everything into these videos, and it genuinely hurts when thousands watch, but only a handful subscribe. Also, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Let's build this community together. Now, back to what happened next. The word hung in the air between them like smoke. Normal. Kim Jae-ho stood in the kitchen, hands still wet from washing vegetables for dinner, and looked at his daughter. She was standing in the doorway with her backpack still on, one strap sliding off her shoulder, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere past his left ear, not meeting his gaze. That was new too. "What do you mean by normal?" he asked, keeping his voice level, fighting the urge to cross the room and pull her close. Zola's hand went to her braids, the intricate pattern he'd spent 40 minutes perfecting that morning, weaving in the purple beads she'd picked out herself 3 weeks ago. Just straighter, flatter, like the other girls. Maybe a ponytail? Something simple. Simple, the word she used when she meant invisible. Did something happen at school? No, Appa. I just think it's time for a change. That's all. The rehearsed quality of her answer told him everything he needed to know. She'd been practicing this conversation, anticipating his questions, building her defenses. He let it go that night. That was his first mistake. The changes came in increments small enough to dismiss, significant enough to accumulate like debt. The first week, Zola started requesting sandwiches for lunch, turkey and cheese on white bread. "The kimbap is great, Appa, but it's kind of heavy. I want something lighter." She said it with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Kim Jae-ho made the sandwiches and told himself it was just a phase. Kids' tastes change. Second week, her lunchbox started coming home full. Not untouched, she was clever about it. She'd take a bite of the sandwich, unwrap the fruit, move things around. But when Kim Jae-ho checked the kitchen trash one evening, he found lunch bags buried under other garbage, carefully wrapped in napkins. She was throwing her food away at school and hiding the evidence at home. Third week, the braiding sessions became silent. Before, this had been their morning ritual of connection. Zola sitting on the kitchen stool, Kim Jae-ho standing behind her, and she would narrate her dreams from the night before, or ask him questions about Seoul, or tell him about the book she was reading. Now, she sat rigid, answering his questions in monosyllables, her shoulders creeping higher with each pass of the comb. Week 4. The flinch. Kim Jae-ho would replay that moment in his mind for weeks afterward, the way you probe a bruise to confirm it still hurts. They were watching a movie, one of the animated films Zola loved, something about dragons and chosen ones. She was curled up on the couch next to him, and one of her braids had come loose from behind her ear. He reached over, a gesture he'd made 1,000 times before, gentle and automatic, to tuck it back. She flinched, a full-body recoil, pulling away from his hand like it was a striking snake. Then she caught herself, forcing her body to relax, but the damage was done. She had flinched from him, from touch that had always meant safety. "Sorry, Appa. You just startled me." But he hadn't startled her. He had become associated with something that made her skin crawl, and she didn't even realize she was doing it. The small erasures accumulated like snow, silent and suffocating. She stopped humming while packing her lunch. Those little songs, nonsense melodies that used to fill the kitchen with the sound of a child who felt secure enough to be unselfconscious. Now the kitchen was silent, except for the zip of her lunchbox and the click of the refrigerator door. She stopped asking for second helpings at dinner. Zola had always had a healthy appetite, the kind that comes from a childhood of scarcity, giving way to abundance. She would ask for more rice, more vegetables, more of whatever Kim Jae-ho had cooked. Now she ate exactly one portion, pushing her plate away with mathematical precision, saying she was full even when he could hear her stomach growling an hour later. The bedtime stories disappeared next. For 2 years, the last part of their evening routine had been Kim Jae-ho sitting on the edge of her bed, reading from whatever book she'd chosen. Sometimes Korean folk tales about tigers and rabbits. Sometimes chapter books about magic schools and brave girls. Now, when he appeared in her doorway at bedtime, she'd say, "I'm too tired tonight, Appa. Maybe tomorrow." Tomorrow never came. She stopped talking about her friends. She used to come home with stories about recess games and art class and who said what at lunch. The narratives had slowed to a trickle, then stopped entirely. When Kim Jae-ho asked about her day, she gave him the executive summary. "Fine. We learned about fractions. I got an A on my spelling test. Facts without feeling. She stopped making eye contact, looking instead at points slightly adjacent to his face, his shoulder, the wall behind him, the space above his head, anywhere but directly at him, as if sustained eye contact would reveal something she was working very hard to hide. And then there was the laughing. Not the polite chuckle she still produced when appropriate, but real laughter, the kind that came from her belly and made her whole face light up. He couldn't remember the last time he'd heard it. Kim Jae-ho tried to ask. God, he tried. Is everything okay at school? He asked over breakfast one morning, watching her push scrambled eggs around her plate. It's fine, Appa. Her voice was bright. Too bright. The vocal equivalent of a spotlight trying to keep him from seeing the shadows. You'd tell me if someone was bothering you, right? Of course. She met his eyes for exactly 2 seconds, then looked away. I'm just tired. Growing takes energy. That's what the school nurse said. Zola, I'm being brave, Appa. Like you taught me. Queens don't complain about little things, right? She smiled at him, and it was the worst thing she could have done. Because she was using his own words as a shield, turning his promise of empowerment into a cage of silence. He wanted to push. Every instinct screamed at him to push, to demand answers, to use the interrogation techniques he'd learned in Seoul that could break through any defense. But this wasn't Seoul. This was his daughter. And if he pushed too hard, she might shatter completely. So he didn't push. That was his second mistake. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night. Kim Jae-ho was in his home office, reviewing contracts for a housing development in West Savannah, when he heard it. A voice, so quiet he almost missed it under the ambient noise of the house, the hum of the air conditioning, the distant rumble of traffic on Abercorn Street. He stood, moving silently through the hallway, a skill he'd learned in another life. Zola's bedroom door was cracked open, a sliver of soft yellow light spilling into the hallway. He could see her kneeling beside her bed, hands pressed together, head bowed. She was praying, Please let me be invisible tomorrow. Just one day where no one sees me, where no one notices my hair or my lunch or the way I talk. Please let me disappear. Just for a little while. I'm so tired of being seen. Her voice cracked on the last word, but no tears came. She had learned not to cry. Kim Jae-ho stood in that hallway, his hand pressed against the wall to keep himself upright, and felt something inside him fracture. A 9-year-old child should be praying for toys, for snow days, for her birthday to come faster. Not for invisibility, not for the mercy of being erased. He waited until he heard her climb into bed, listened for the rhythm of her breathing to slow into sleep. Then he went back to his office and closed the door. The realization settled over him like a physical weight. His daughter was being destroyed by something, and she had learned to survive it by making herself smaller, by erasing the parts of herself that made her visible, by becoming the ghost she prayed to be. And he had been too careful, too afraid of pushing too hard, to see it until now. I will see her world, he decided, not through her eyes. She had learned to lie too well for that. But with his own. He would enter the battlefield she walked through alone, and he would bear witness to whatever was killing his daughter, one invisible wound at a time. So Kim Jae-ho did something he hadn't done in 4 years. He called in a favor. Not from Seoul, from a man who owed him a life. Detective David Miller had been a rookie cop working a cross-border trafficking case 5 years ago when Kim Jae-ho provided information that saved Miller's career and possibly his life. They'd kept in touch sporadically. Holiday cards, the occasional text. Miller didn't ask questions about Kim Jae-ho's past. Kim Jae-ho didn't ask about Miller's present. I need access to a school building, Kim Jae-ho said when Miller answered. Unofficial, undetected. There was a pause. What kind of school? Elementary. Savannah County District. During lunch hours. Another pause. Longer this time. Does this involve your daughter? Yes. Do I want to know details? Not yet. Okay, give me 24 hours. The line went dead. Kim Jae-ho sat in his office, watching the clock on his desk count down the seconds, and planned. Not a rescue. Not yet. First, reconnaissance. He needed to see what Zola was protecting him from. He needed to understand the enemy that had taught his daughter to pray for invisibility. And if what he found confirmed his worst nightmare, if his daughter was being hunted in a place that promised safety, then the man from Seoul would return. Not with violence, with something far more devastating, precision. Tuesday, 11:47 a.m. Kim Jae-ho's black sedan pulled into the school parking lot. But he didn't go to the front office. He went hunting. The side entrance to Savannah Elementary was propped open with a rubber wedge, exactly as Detective Miller had promised. The custodian, a man named Raymond, who had once needed help with an eviction notice that Kim Jae-ho made disappear, had left it that way during his smoke break. No cameras on this door. No line of sight from the main office. Just a narrow hallway that smelled of floor wax and institutional disinfectant, leading directly to the cafeteria service entrance. Kim Jae-ho slipped inside at 11:47 a.m., carrying the insulated lunch bag like a talisman. He moved with the practiced silence of someone who had spent years existing in spaces where being noticed meant being dead. His footsteps made no sound on the linoleum. His breathing was controlled, measured. He was a ghost in a building full of noise and chaos, and children who believed the world was safe. The cafeteria service door had a small window, reinforced glass, chicken wire embedded in it, the kind designed to withstand impact. Kim Jae-ho positioned himself at an angle where he could see without being seen, his body pressed against the wall, and surveyed the battlefield. Because that's what it was, a battlefield. The cafeteria was a study in social geography, territory marked by invisible lines that every child understood and every adult pretended not to see. 4 tables closest to the teacher's monitoring station, occupied by the loud kids, the popular kids, the ones who moved through the world with the confidence of people who had never been told they didn't belong. They laughed too loud, traded snacks, threw food when the teachers weren't looking. The rules didn't apply to them because they had numbers, solidarity, the protective shield of being normal. The center tables, occupied by the middle-tier kids who weren't quite popular enough for the safe zone, but weren't vulnerable enough to be targets. They kept their heads down, ate quickly, spoke in moderate volumes. They survived by being unremarkable. One table, pushed against the far wall near the emergency exit, partially obscured by a support pillar. That's where the invisible kids sat. The ones with the wrong clothes, wrong lunches, wrong accents, wrong skin, wrong hair, wrong everything. Some sat alone. Some clustered together in small defensive formations. All of them had learned the same survival tactic. Minimize your surface area. Be small. Be quiet. Be gone. That's where Zol would sit. Kim Jae-ho knew it before he saw her. She entered the cafeteria at 11:52 a.m., part of the 3rd grade lunch wave. Kim Jae-ho's breath caught in his chest. Her body language was military. Shoulders back, spine straight, chin level. The posture of someone marching into enemy territory with full awareness of the danger. But her eyes were down, gaze fixed on a point 3 feet in front of her, using peripheral vision to navigate. Don't make eye contact. Don't invite engagement. Don't give them an excuse. She wore the yellow dress with the sunflowers. His favorite. The one that made her look like a burst of sunshine. But there was nothing bright about the way she moved. She walked like she was trying to take up as little space as possible, arms pressed to her sides, steps small and precise. She made it to the corner table without incident. Small victory. Kim Jae-ho watched as she set her lunchbox down with careful precision, arranging it so the corners were parallel to the table edge. Control the small things. If you can control the small things, maybe the big things won't destroy you. She opened the lunchbox, and for one moment, one brief, devastating moment, her face transformed. Hope. Pure, unguarded hope as she unwrapped the dumplings he had made that morning. The pork and chive ones. The little clouds of happy. She smiled, and it was the real smile, the one he hadn't seen in weeks. Then the wolves came. 3 boys. Kim Jae-ho cataloged them with the clinical precision of a man assessing threats. 10 years old, maybe 11. Sun-bleached hair that spoke of summer camps and beach vacations. Athletic build. Expensive sneakers. The kind of confidence that comes from never being told no in a way that mattered. He moved through the cafeteria like he owned it. And in the social hierarchy of elementary school, he probably did. Behind him, 2 smaller boys acted as flankers, followers who needed the leader's approval like oxygen. They laughed before the jokes landed, anticipated his movements, positioned themselves to block escape routes without conscious thought. Pack behavior, predatory and practiced. They approached Zola's table with the casual menace of people who knew no adult would stop them. The leader leaned in, nose wrinkling in exaggerated disgust. Kim Jae-ho could read his lips through the glass. What's that smell? Did you bring dog food? Zola froze. Her hands, which had been unwrapping a dumpling, stopped mid-motion. She didn't look up, didn't respond. The classic strategy, if you don't engage, maybe they'll get bored. They didn't get bored. One of the flankers pointed at the kimbap. Kim Jae-ho had rolled at dawn, rice and vegetables and sesame oil wrapped in seaweed with the precision of origami. Dude, that's disgusting. What even is that? A girl materialized from the safe zone. Blonde pigtails, pink shirt, the kind of aggressive femininity that often masks cruelty in elementary school. She leaned over Zola's shoulder, voice carrying across 3 tables. You, is that seaweed? That's so gross. Who eats that? Other heads turned. The spotlight effect. Now Zola wasn't just being attacked, she was being performed for. Entertainment for the masses. The leader raised his hands to his face. Kim Jae-ho's vision tunneled. The boy pulled at the corners of his eyes, stretching them into cruel slits, his mouth twisting into a mockery of an accent. Ching chong ching chong. Does your dog food come from China? Do you eat cats? The 2 flankers erupted in laughter, the sound cutting through the ambient cafeteria noise. Other kids looked over. Some laughed, some looked away, none intervened. Zola's hands gripped the edge of the table. Her knuckles went white, the same white Kim Jae-ho's had been when he stood at that cafeteria door days ago. She stared at a point on the wall, her face a mask of controlled nothing. But Kim Jae-ho could see the tension in her jaw, the rapid pulse in her throat, the way her breathing had gone shallow. Maybe if you ate normal food, people would like you, the girl with pigtails said, her voice saccharine with false concern. I'm just trying to help. That's when the leader's foot came up. A casual motion, almost lazy, like he was kicking a can on the sidewalk. His sneaker connected with Zola's lunchbox, the one Kim Jae-ho had packed with love that morning, the one that represented hours of preparation and hope, and the desperate prayer that today might be different. The lunchbox launched off the table, tumbling through the air in slow motion. The lid came off, dumplings scattered across the cafeteria floor like broken promises, rolling under tables, trampled by passing feet. The kimbap unraveled, rice and vegetables spreading in a mess that would be impossible to salvage. The strawberries he'd cut into hearts skittered across linoleum, crushed under the heel of a passing student who didn't even notice. Zola didn't move, didn't cry, didn't even flinch. She just sat there, hands still gripping the table, staring at nothing. 5 feet away, Mr. Sterling leaned against a support pillar. Kim Jae-ho's gaze locked onto him like a targeting system. Khakis, polo shirt with the school logo, lanyard around his neck with his ID badge and whistle. The tools of authority he chose not to use. Phone in his hand, thumb scrolling through what looked like social media. Sterling looked up. His eyes swept across the scene. Zola frozen at her table, the boys laughing, the food scattered across the floor. Kim Jae-ho saw it happen. The moment of decision. Sterling's eyes registered the situation, processed it, and then he looked back down at his phone. A conscious choice. Deliberate indifference. Not ignorance. Complicity. Kim Jae-ho's body went into overdrive. His chest tightened, ribs constricting around lungs that suddenly couldn't pull in enough air. The metallic taste flooded his mouth again. Adrenaline and rage and something darker, something that tasted like soul and blood and decisions that couldn't be unmade. His vision narrowed, peripheral awareness dropping away until all he could see was Sterling's face, the boys' faces, the trajectory between where he stood and where they stood. His body cataloged responses. 5 strides to reach the leader, 1 hand to the back of the neck, enough pressure to make him understand fear. Sterling would be next. That phone would end up somewhere anatomically uncomfortable. His hand moved to the door handle, the old instincts flooding back like muscle memory. This is what he had been. This is what he knew. Violence as communication. Power as currency. Then Zola's eyes found his. Across 30 feet of cafeteria space, through the chaos and the laughter and the scattered remains of his love made manifest in dumplings and rice, his daughter saw him. Their eyes locked, and Kim Jae-ho saw something that stopped him colder than any bullet ever had. Terror, not of the bullies, of him, of what he might do. She shook her head, the tiniest movement, barely perceptible, but absolute in its meaning. Don't. Please, Appa, don't. Her eyes pleaded with him in a language they developed over 2 years of learning to be a family. If you save me now, I pay for it tomorrow, and the day after, and every day until they break me completely. 1 tear escaped, tracking down her cheek. She wiped it away with lightning speed, checking to make sure none of the other kids saw. Because tears were weakness. Tears were ammunition for future attacks. Kim Jae-ho didn't move. Not because he was weak, but because he realized something that made him colder than any Seoul winter. This wasn't the first time. This was a routine. The boys knew exactly where to stand. The girl knew exactly what to say. Sterling knew exactly when to look away. And Zola knew exactly how to survive it. By becoming a statue, by absorbing the blows, by protecting her father from the knowledge that would make him do something that would only make it worse. His daughter had been surviving this alone. Not for days, for weeks, maybe months. And she had become so skilled at it, so practiced in the art of silent suffering, that he hadn't seen it until it had nearly destroyed her. He left the cafeteria the same way he entered, silent, invisible. But the man who walked out was not the man who walked in. Kim Jae-ho waited in the hallway outside the cafeteria like a predator at a watering hole. He knew Mr. Sterling's routine now, had memorized it during those 47 minutes of observation. Lunch duty ended at 12:35 p.m. Sterling would exit through the west corridor, stop at the staff bathroom, then head to the teacher's lounge for what looked like his daily ritual of microwaved leftovers and whatever gossip was being traded over Tupperware containers. Today, Sterling wouldn't make it to the bathroom. Kim Jae-ho positioned himself at the exact point where the hallway narrowed, where lockers on both sides created a natural choke point that made avoidance impossible without obvious rudeness. He stood with his hands clasped loosely in front of him, his posture relaxed, his face arranged into the expression of a concerned parent who simply wanted a moment of a busy teacher's time. The performance was flawless. No one looking at him would see the man from Seoul. They would see a father, polite, reasonable, non-threatening. Sterling emerged from the cafeteria at 12:36 p.m., scrolling through his phone, his lanyard swinging as he walked with the loose-limbed confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable. He looked up 3 steps before he would have collided with Kim Jae-ho, and his face performed a rapid calculation, annoyance flashing for a microsecond before being replaced by professional courtesy. "Oh, Mr. Kim?" Sterling's voice carried the honeyed drawl of performative Southern charm, the kind that could make a dismissal sound like an invitation. "How can I help you?" His tone suggested he had all the time in the world, while his body language, weight shifting toward his back foot, phone still visible in his hand, communicated the exact opposite. "I'd like a moment of your time, Mr. Sterling, to discuss what happened to my daughter at lunch today." Kim Jae-ho kept his voice level, stripped of inflection. Just facts. Just a father seeking clarity. Sterling's eyebrows rose in what was meant to look like surprise, but read more like practiced confusion. "Oh, did something happen? I wasn't aware of any incidents." The lie was so smooth it almost sounded true. Almost. 3 boys surrounded Zola's lunch table. They mocked her food, made racist gestures, and kicked her lunchbox across the cafeteria floor. Kim Jae-ho delivered each detail with surgical precision, watching Sterling's face for tells. "You were standing approximately 5 feet away." Sterling's expression shifted through several configurations: surprise, concern, thoughtfulness, like someone auditioning different masks to see which one fit. He landed on paternal understanding, complete with a slight head shake and a small, indulgent smile. "Oh, kids will be kids, Mr. Kim. You know how it is. They're just figuring out social dynamics at this age. Sometimes they don't realize how their words land. It's all part of learning to navigate peer relationships." He said it with the casual dismissiveness of someone who had deployed this exact script dozens of times before. "I saw a child mock my daughter's ethnicity while you stood 5 feet away and did nothing." Kim Jae-ho's voice didn't rise. Didn't need to. The statement hung in the air between them like a blade. Sterling's smile tightened, losing a fraction of its warmth. "Now, Mr. Kim, I think you're being a bit sensitive." The word landed with deliberate weight, a verbal pat on the head. Savannah has its own culture, and sometimes it takes time for children to adjust. Zola is a sweet girl, truly, but she can be a bit standoffish. Maybe if she tried to fit in more, made more of an effort to connect with the other children, they'd be more receptive. There it was, the pivot. The blame shift executed with such practiced ease, it almost sounded reasonable. The victim becomes the problem. The outsider needs to adjust. The system is fine. The child is the malfunction. Are you suggesting my 9-year-old daughter is responsible for being racially harassed? Kim Jae-ho's tone remained conversational, but something in his stillness changed. The air between them grew colder. "I'm not suggesting anything of the sort." Sterling's voice took on a note of wounded professionalism, as if Kim Jae-ho was the one being unreasonable. "I'm simply saying that sometimes children who stand out, Whether it's their food choices, their cultural background, their level of participation, sometimes they draw attention. Have you considered that her lunch choices might be making her a target? Kids notice differences, Mr. Kim. They're curious. Sometimes that curiosity comes out in ways that aren't ideal. He delivered it with such gentle concern, such reasonable-sounding logic, that someone less experienced might have second-guessed themselves. Might have wondered if maybe their foreign food was the problem. Maybe their child was too sensitive. Maybe they were overreacting. Kim Jae-ho recognized it for what it was: institutional gaslighting, weaponized reasonableness, the bureaucratic equivalent of a knife to the throat delivered with a smile. This man wasn't incompetent. He was complicit. Worse, he was practiced. This wasn't the first time he'd had this conversation. It wasn't even the 100th. Mr. Sterling. Kim Jae-ho took one step closer, closing the distance between them to just under what American culture considered comfortable personal space. Not threatening, just intimate enough to make Sterling's eyes widen fractionally. Let me be clear. My daughter was assaulted. You witnessed it. And you did nothing. Sterling's mask cracked just for a moment. Defensiveness flashed across his features before being buried under a new expression, something harder, less friendly. His voice lost its honey coating. Mr. Kim, I understand you're concerned, but I think you need to be very careful about the accusations you're making. This is a respected institution. I've been teaching here for 17 years. I know these children. I know this community. The unspoken message landed with perfect clarity. You don't belong here. You're the outsider. Who do you think they'll believe? Sterling continued, his tone shifting to something that lived in the space between warning and threat. We wouldn't want any misunderstandings that might affect Zola's standing here. She's already struggling to integrate. Additional attention on her situation could make things more difficult for everyone involved. There it was, not even thinly veiled. A direct threat wrapped in concern. Stay quiet or we'll make it worse for your daughter. Kim Jae-ho smiled, not the warm smile he gave Zola, not the polite smile he wore for business associates. This was the smile from Seoul, the smile that came right before empires crumbled. The smile that men in expensive suits had learned to fear because it meant their world was about to end and they just didn't know it yet. Thank you for your time, Mr. Sterling. This conversation has been illuminating. He said it with perfect politeness, even gave a small nod of acknowledgement before stepping aside to let Sterling pass. Sterling moved past him quickly, his confident stride just slightly off rhythm, like someone who had just realized they'd made a mistake, but couldn't quite identify what it was. He disappeared down the hallway toward the bathroom, phone already back in his hand, probably already convincing himself the conversation had gone exactly as he'd planned. Kim Jae-ho stood in that empty hallway and felt something click into place. The same feeling he used to get in Seoul when all the pieces of a complex operation finally aligned. When you could see the whole board, every player's position, every weakness in their defenses. Mr. Sterling had just made a critical mistake. He'd assumed Kim Jae-ho was just another concerned parent, someone who could be managed with bureaucratic double talk and subtle threats, someone who would back down when faced with institutional authority, someone who valued his daughter's social standing more than her dignity. He had no idea who he was dealing with. Had no concept that the man standing in his school hallway had toppled organizations far more powerful than a small-town elementary school. Had never imagined that the polite real estate developer in the pressed shirt was someone who knew exactly how to dismantle a system from the inside out. Sterling thought this was over. He was wrong. It was just beginning. That night, Kim Jae-ho made 2 phone calls. The first was to a detective. The second was to a man in Seoul he swore he'd never contact again. Detective David Miller arrived at Kim Jae-ho's estate at 9:47 p.m., driving an unmarked sedan that he parked in the circular driveway like he'd done it 100 times before. He hadn't. This was only his 3rd visit to the house, but Miller had the cop instinct of making himself comfortable in any environment, a survival skill learned from years of walking into situations where showing uncertainty could get you killed. Kim Jae-ho met him at the door, and Miller noticed immediately that something fundamental had shifted. The last time they'd spoken face-to-face was 18 months ago at a charity barbecue where Kim Jae-ho had smiled easily, made small talk about real estate markets and Savannah's restaurant scene, played the role of reformed businessman with Oscar-worthy conviction. That man was gone. The person standing in the doorway had colder eyes, a predatory stillness that Miller recognized from his years working organized crime cases. "Thank you for coming," Kim Jae-ho said, stepping aside to let him enter. "You said it was about your daughter." "Of course I came." Miller followed him through the house, past the elegant living room with its antique furniture and carefully curated art, past the kitchen that looked like it belonged in a Southern Living magazine, to a home office that told a different story entirely. The office was all function, no decoration. 3 monitors on a standing desk, filing cabinets with biometric locks, a whiteboard covered in notes written in Korean. This wasn't the workspace of a casual real estate developer. This was a war room. 5 years ago, Kim Jae-ho said without preamble, pulling up a chair for Miller, "You were working that trafficking case out of the port of Savannah, the one where your informant disappeared and your captain was ready to shut it down." Miller remembered. That case had nearly ended his career before it started. "You gave me the shipping manifests, the real ones. Never asked how you got them, and you told me not to. I'm asking you to return the favor. No questions about methods. Just help me find what I'm looking for." Kim Jae-ho's fingers were already moving across the keyboard, pulling up screens of data that made Miller's cop instincts twitch. Some of this looked official, public records, school board meeting minutes. Some of it decidedly did not. "What am I looking at?" Miller asked, leaning forward. 3 years of incident reports from Savannah Elementary. I need you to help me find the pattern." They worked in silence for the first hour, Miller's training in data analysis proving invaluable as they sorted through hundreds of documents. The school's digital filing system was a mess. Intentionally, Miller suspected. Reports scattered across multiple folders, filed under inconsistent naming conventions, some digitized poorly as if someone had scanned them at low resolution to make details harder to read. But patterns emerged anyway, the way they always did when someone tried to hide the truth in bureaucracy. Incident reports would be filed by teachers or cafeteria staff documenting fights, bullying, racial slurs. Then, days or weeks later, revised versions would appear. The language softened, context removed, victims reclassified as aggressors. Racial harassment became playground misunderstanding. Deliberate exclusion became children working through social development. "Look at the signatures," Miller said, pointing to the screen. "Every revision, same person. Arthur Sterling." The name appeared again and again, authorizing changes that transformed documented abuse into administrative non-events. "How many?" Kim Jae-ho asked, his voice flat. Miller kept scrolling, counting. "In the past 3 years, 47 revised reports, all signed by Sterling. And look at this." He pulled up a spreadsheet tracking student enrollment changes. 3 Black families transferred their kids out in the past 18 months. No explanation in the official records, but I can cross-reference with the incident reports. His laptop pinged. Kim Jae-ho's phone buzzed simultaneously. An email notification. Miller watched Kim Jae-ho's jaw tighten as he read it. "What is it?" Kim Jae-ho turned his monitor so Miller could see. An official email from the school administration, CC'd to the principal and school board secretary. Subject line, "Behavioral concerns, Zola Jae-ho, grade 3. Miller read it aloud, his voice growing harder with each sentence. "Zola has demonstrated ongoing difficulty integrating with her peer group. She exhibits standoffish behavior, refuses to participate in group activities, and shows resistance to teacher guidance. Multiple staff members have noted her unwillingness to adapt to classroom culture. We recommend a parent-teacher conference to discuss intervention strategies." "They're building a paper trail against her," Miller said, the pieces clicking into place. "You confronted Sterling today, didn't you?" Kim Jae-ho nodded. "This is retaliation. They're covering their tracks in case you escalate. If you file a formal complaint, they'll pull this email and say Zola was already a problem student. They'll flip the narrative, make you look like an overprotective parent who can't accept that his daughter has behavioral issues." Kim Jae-ho's expression didn't change, but his fingers moved across the keyboard with increased velocity. "Go deeper. Financial records. I want to know who funds this school." Miller hesitated. "That's getting into territory where I can't officially help you." Then unofficially. It took another 2 hours. Miller provided the access credentials, public records requests he'd filed for other cases, databases he had legitimate access to as a detective. Kim Jae-ho provided the technical expertise, navigating through financial disclosures and tax documents with the precision of someone who had done this kind of forensic accounting before. The school's funding came from three sources: state allocation, federal grants, and private donors. The private donor list was short but significant, several local businesses contributing modest amounts, a few individual donors in the 10 to 20,000 range, and then one donor that dwarfed all the others combined, JH Trust LLC. Anonymous benefactor, $2.4 million over 3 years. New STEM wing, library renovation, athletic complex, state-of-the-art playground equipment. Who's donor JH Trust LLC? Miller asked, though something in the way Kim Jae-ho had gone completely still told him he already knew the answer. The silence stretched between them like a physical presence. No, Miller said softly. You're the anonymous donor. You've been funding this school. Kim Jae-ho stared at the screen, at the itemized list of his contributions, the new computers in every classroom, the scholarship fund for underprivileged students, the renovated cafeteria where his daughter sat alone at a corner table while other children ate meals in a building his money had paid to improve. I set it up through a shell company when we first moved here. I wanted Zola to have the best education. I researched schools, found this one had strong test scores, but needed infrastructure investment. I thought. His voice caught just for a moment. I thought I was giving her the world. Instead, I was funding the system that's destroying her. Miller pulled up another document, this one requiring password access, that Kim Jae-ho provided without comment. School board member profiles. President Harold Brenneman, local attorney, 3 children enrolled in the district, active in community governance for 12 years. Look at his kids' names, Miller said, highlighting a section. Tyler Brenneman, grade 4. Also listed, recipient of the Outstanding Student Achievement Award for 3 consecutive years. Also listed in several incident reports that had been revised or withdrawn. Miller cross-referenced with security footage timestamps Kim Jae-ho had obtained, he didn't ask how, from the cafeteria. Tyler Brenneman, sun-bleached hair, expensive sneakers, the boy who had kicked Zola's lunchbox across the floor. The school board president, Miller said slowly, is the father of the kid who assaulted your daughter, and Sterling is protecting him. Kim Jae-ho pulled up another file, this one a PDF of an incident report from 2 years ago. Miller leaned in to read it. A girl named Amara, age 8, had reported to her homeroom teacher that she was being excluded from recess activities and called racial slurs by a group of students. The teacher filed a formal complaint. 3 days later, Amara was removed from the school, officially withdrawn for disciplinary reasons. The revised incident report, signed by Arthur Sterling, stated that Amara had been aggressive toward peers, unable to adapt to school culture, and demonstrated behavioral issues that required intervention beyond what the school could provide. Miller found the original report buried in an archived folder. It told a completely different story. Amara had been quiet, respectful, academically gifted. The aggression was her telling a teacher she was being bullied. The inability to adapt was her refusal to accept racist treatment. The behavioral issues were the crime of reporting abuse while being Black. How many others? Kim Jae-ho asked. Miller didn't want to answer, but he did. Based on what I'm seeing, at least a dozen in the past 5 years, maybe more. They have a system. Document the victim as the problem. Wear down the parents. Force them to withdraw their kids quietly to avoid further issues. Keep the school's reputation pristine. Kim Jae-ho stared at the screen, at the name JH Trust LLC, at the $2.4 million he had poured into a school that was torturing his daughter with his own money, at the faces of children who had been erased from the record, rewritten as villains in their own stories of victimization, at a system so perfectly designed to protect itself that it could turn love into a weapon and use a father's generosity to fund his daughter's destruction. And for the first time in 4 years, the man from Seoul came back online. I need to pause here because this next part, where Kim Jae-ho finally fights back, is the reason I spent weeks on this video. If Zola's story is hitting you, if you've ever felt invisible or watched someone you love suffer in silence, do me a favor. Like this video and subscribe. I can't keep making these without your support, and honestly, it breaks my heart when people watch, feel everything, and then leave without subscribing. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had to stand up to a system that tried to silence you. Your story matters. Now let's talk about what Kim Jae-ho did next. The next morning, Zola came downstairs for breakfast. But her father wasn't in the kitchen. He was in his office, on the phone, speaking in a language she didn't understand. And when he hung up, he looked at her with eyes she'd never seen before. Not angry, not sad, cold, calculating, unstoppable. Dinner sat untouched between them, like an accusation. Kim Jae-ho had made Zola's favorite, galbi with caramelized edges, rice cooked to the precise texture she loved, cucumber kimchi that was more sweet than spicy because she'd never developed a taste for heat. He'd spent 2 hours preparing it, each motion a meditation, each ingredient a prayer that tonight would be different. That tonight, she would eat. That tonight, she would talk. That tonight, the girl he'd adopted would return from wherever she'd been disappearing to. But Zola sat across from him with her hands in her lap, staring at her plate like it was evidence of a crime. She hadn't touched anything, hadn't even picked up her chopsticks. Just pushed the plate 3 inches away from her with the careful precision of someone disposing of something toxic. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Kim Jae-ho kept his voice gentle, a lifeline thrown into dark water. Zola's hands moved to her braids, the purple beads he'd woven in that morning clicking softly as her fingers twisted the strands. She'd been doing that more lately, pulling at her hair like she was trying to erase it from existence. "Appa," she said, and her voice was so small it made his chest hurt. "Can I cut my hair?" The words landed like shrapnel. Kim Jae-ho felt the cold spread through his body, starting in his chest and radiating outward like ice crystallizing in his veins. The kitchen air suddenly felt thin, insufficient, as if the oxygen had been replaced with something that looked like air but wouldn't fill his lungs properly. "Cut your hair?" he repeated, buying time while his mind raced to understand the full scope of what she was really asking. "Yeah, maybe if I look more normal, they'll stop." She said it without looking at him, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere past his shoulder, and the casual way she delivered it, like she was asking to change her shirt, not erase a fundamental part of her identity, made the cold spread faster. Kim Jae-ho's hands were resting on the table. He watched them, distantly, as they began to shake. Tiny tremors he couldn't control, the body's rebellion against a mind trying desperately to stay calm. His daughter wanted to erase herself to survive. The thought moved through him with the cold clarity of drowning. "Zola, I don't want to be different anymore." The words tumbled out now, faster, like a dam breaking. "I don't want the braids. I don't want the lunches. I don't want the dresses that make people stare. I just want to be invisible. I just want to be normal. I just want them to stop seeing me." Her voice cracked on the last word, but no tears came. She'd learned not to cry. The air in the room felt like it was pressing down on Kim Jae-ho's shoulders, crushing his lungs, making each breath an act of will. The temperature seemed to have dropped 20 degrees, though he knew it was just his body's response to watching his daughter beg for the mercy of erasure. "Why didn't you tell me it was this bad?" His voice came out rougher than he intended, scraped raw by the effort of not screaming. Zola finally looked at him, and her eyes held a weariness that no 9-year-old should possess. The kind of exhaustion that comes from fighting a war no one believes you're in. "Because you can't fix it, Appa." She said it gently, like she was the one comforting him. "You can yell at the teachers, and then I go back tomorrow and it's worse. You can call the principal, and they'll smile and say they'll handle it, and nothing changes except now the kids know I told. That's how it works. The only thing I can control is me. How I look, what I bring for lunch, how small I can make myself." Kim Jae-ho felt something inside him fracture. Not break, fracture. The difference mattered. A break is sudden, clean. A fracture is structural damage, the kind that spreads through foundations and brings down buildings days or weeks later when everyone thinks the danger has passed. His daughter had been protecting him. Not from the bullies, from the truth. From the knowledge that she existed in a system designed to grind her down until she either disappeared or became so small, so invisible, so normal that she no longer counted as different. She hadn't told him because she didn't believe justice was possible. She believed survival required surrender. "Zola." He waited until she met his eyes. "Look at me, really look at me." She did, and he saw the hope there, buried under layers of resignation, but still flickering, still alive. "You are not the problem. You are not too different. You are not too much. And I am going to show you that the world bends to people who refuse to break, not the other way around." His voice steadied as he spoke, each word a nail driven into a coffin he was building for the system that had tried to destroy his daughter. How? Zola asked, and the exhaustion in that single syllable nearly undid him. She wanted to believe, but belief required energy she no longer had. Do you trust me? Always. No hesitation. Despite everything, despite the weeks of suffering alone, despite learning that adults couldn't protect her, she still trusted him. The weight of that trust settled on Kim Jae-ho's shoulders like a physical presence. Then trust me one more week. 1 week, and everything changes. Can you do that? Zola looked at him for a long moment, her fingers still twisted in her braids. Then slowly she nodded. 1 week. 1 week, he confirmed. And Zola? The braids stay. The lunches stay. You stay. Exactly as you are. Because there is nothing about you that needs to change to deserve respect. She smiled then, small and fragile, but real. Okay, Appa. What Zola didn't know was that her father had already set the pieces in motion. Not for revenge, for eradication. Because Kim Jae-ho didn't fight battles. He removed the board from the game entirely. The next Tuesday, the Savannah County School Board held their monthly public meeting. Attendance was usually 12 people. That night, there were 70. And sitting in the back row, in a suit that cost more than the principal's car, was Kim Jae-ho. He wasn't there to ask for anything. He was there to collect. The Savannah County School Board meeting room existed in a state of determined mediocrity. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead with the persistent drone of institutional indifference, casting everything in a flat, colorless wash that made even the youngest attendees look tired. Laminated name placards sat in front of each board member, the kind printed on an office laser printer and slipped into plastic sleeves that had yellowed with age. Folding chairs arranged in careful rows. An American flag in the corner that hadn't been replaced since the 1990s. The entire space screamed small-town bureaucracy, the kind of place where important-sounding decisions were made by unimportant people who believed their power was unassailable. The attendance was unusual. Typically, these monthly meetings drew maybe 12 people, board members, a few teachers fulfilling professional development requirements, occasionally a parent with a specific grievance about bus routes or lunch menus. Tonight, 70 people packed into a room designed for 30. Parents lined the walls. Teachers filled the back rows. Even a local news reporter stood near the door with a notebook, drawn by some instinct that something newsworthy was about to happen. The school board sat at a long table at the front of the room. 5 members, all white, all over 50, all wearing the comfortable confidence of people who had never been meaningfully challenged. President Harold Brenneman occupied the center seat, a local attorney with silver hair and the kind of face that photographed well for campaign mailers. He looked bored, checking his watch periodically, probably calculating how quickly they could move through the agenda and get back to whatever Tuesday night routine this meeting was interrupting. Mr. Sterling sat in the second row, legs crossed, scrolling through his phone with the casual arrogance of someone who believed himself untouchable. He'd worn a sport coat tonight, business casual, respectable, the costume of a dedicated educator who definitely hadn't spent the afternoon covering his tracks. Every few minutes, he'd glance up, make eye contact with Brenneman, exchange the kind of knowing look that spoke of conversations held in parking lots and assurances given in hallways. Principal Lockage stood at the podium, droning through budget reports in a monotone that could sedate an entire auditorium. And if we move to line item 473, you'll see the proposed allocation for textbook replacement has been adjusted downward by 3% to account for. Her voice was the auditory equivalent of watching paint dry. That's when Kim Jae-ho entered. He didn't announce himself, didn't make noise, simply walked through the door at the back of the room at 7:47 p.m., 3 minutes before the public comment period was scheduled to begin. But his presence moved through the space like a pressure change before a storm. Heads turned. Whispers rippled outward in concentric circles. Parents who knew him from charity events stared. Teachers who had seen him at school pick up nudged each other. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Principal Lockage's monthly salary. Charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, the kind of suit that communicated power without needing to speak. He moved down the center aisle with the unhurried confidence of someone who owned every room they entered and took a seat in the back row. Alone, hands folded in his lap, expression neutral, waiting. 3 rows ahead of him, Detective David Miller sat with his badge visible on his belt. He didn't look at Kim Jae-ho, didn't acknowledge him, just sat there in his plain clothes. Jeans, button-down shirt, the deliberate casual dress of an off-duty cop who wanted everyone to know he was still a cop. His presence was a message. This is official. This is serious. This is not going away. Principal Lockage stumbled over her next sentence, losing her place in the budget report. Brenneman's bored expression sharpened into something more alert. Sterling looked up from his phone, his eyes finding Kim Jae-ho's across the crowded room, and for just a moment his confident smile flickered. Kim Jae-ho cataloged the room the way he used to in Seoul, old instincts activating, mapping territory without conscious thought. 2 exits, main door in the back, emergency exit stage left. Brenneman's body language, defensive, arms crossed, already preparing for confrontation. The woman in the third seat, board secretary, nervous hand movements, probable weak link. Sterling, overconfident, underestimating the threat. Lockage, administrator class, will follow whoever holds power. The reporter, wild card, potential amplifier. 23 potential allies in the crowd based on their reactions when he entered. 47 unknowns. 0 guaranteed enemies besides the board, and Sterling. Acceptable odds. Which brings us to public comment, Lockage said, clearly eager to finish the meeting and escape the strange tension that had invaded her orderly bureaucratic space. Does anyone wish to address the board? Please remember, comments are limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Silence. 70 people in a room designed for 30, and no one spoke. They were all waiting, sensing something but not understanding what. Kim Jae-ho stood. The sound of his chair scraping against linoleum echoed in the quiet like a gunshot. I'd like to address the board. His voice carried to every corner of the room without being loud. Sterling and Brenneman exchanged a glance. Quick, worried, the first crack in their armor. Lockage's smile became forced, practiced, the kind of smile administrators use when they're scared but can't show it. Of course, Mr. Kim, please come forward. And remember, we ask that all comments be kept to 3 minutes. Kim Jae-ho walked to the podium, his footsteps measured, unhurried, the walk of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen and had made peace with it. He carried a single leather folder, expensive, embossed, the kind used for important documents. He placed it on the table in front of the board members with a soft sound that somehow felt final. He looked at each board member in turn, met their eyes, let them see him. Then he spoke. I'm not here to complain. I'm here to inform you that as of this moment, I am withdrawing my financial support from this institution. All of it. The room went silent. Not the awkward silence of before, but the absolute silence of a detonation. Oxygen sucked out of the space. Brenneman leaned forward, his face draining of color. Lockage's forced smile cracked and fell away like plaster from a wall. And Mr. Sterling finally looked up from his phone, his confident expression replaced by something that looked a lot like fear. Because none of them knew what was in that folder, but they were about to find out. Kim Jae-ho didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to, because the documents he was about to present weren't just evidence. They were a detonation sequence. Kim Jae-ho opened the folder with the deliberate care of a surgeon making the first incision. Every eye in the room tracked his hands as he removed a single sheet of paper, the first page of something that was clearly much longer. For those who don't know me, my name is Kim Jae-ho. I am the father of Zola Jae-ho, a 9-year-old student in your 3rd grade class. His voice was conversational, almost pleasant, the tone of someone discussing the weather. I am also the anonymous donor behind the JH Trust LLC, which has contributed $2.4 million to this school over the past 3 years. The gasps came in waves. Someone dropped a pen. The sound of it hitting the linoleum floor echoed like a gunshot. Brenneman's face went from its healthy tan to a sickly gray in the span of 3 seconds. Board members frantically flipped through the budget documents in front of them, as if they could retroactively verify what they'd just heard. Sterling's phone slipped from his hand, clattering onto his lap. He didn't pick it up. Kim Jae-ho let the silence expand, filling the room like water rising in a sealed chamber. He was in no hurry. Time was now his weapon, and he wielded it with the precision of a man who had spent years learning that the space between words often communicated more than the words themselves. I funded your STEM wing, your library renovation, your athletic complex, the security cameras in your hallways and cafeteria, the computers in every classroom, the scholarship fund for underprivileged students. He paused, meeting the eyes of each board member in turn. I did this because I believed in education. I believed in giving children, all children, the resources they needed to thrive. The board members sat frozen, their faces a study in expressions ranging from shock to dawning horror. Brenneman's hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. The board secretary's pen hovered over her notepad, motionless, as if she'd forgotten how to write. What I didn't know, Kim Jae-ho continued, removing another document from the folder, was that I was funding a system designed to torture my daughter. He placed the first document on the table facing the board. On the screen behind him, the one typically used for budget presentations, an image appeared. Security footage. Time-stamped. The cafeteria. Exhibit A. These are security camera timestamps from your cafeteria over the past 6 weeks. The cameras I paid for. The footage obtained through entirely legal means by a private investigator. The screen cycled through images. Each one showed Zola at her corner table. Each one showed children surrounding her. Each one showed Mr. Sterling in frame, always within visual range, never intervening. Sterling's face had gone red, then white, then a mottled combination of both. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. Around him, teachers shifted in their seats, some looking away, others leaning forward with expressions that suggested this was not news to them. The footage played. No audio, just the silent testimony of a child being systematically destroyed while authority watched and did nothing. The room's silence was absolute. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to hum more quietly, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Kim Jae-ho removed the next set of documents. Exhibit B. Original incident reports filed by teachers and cafeteria staff over the past 3 years. Note the dates. Note the descriptions. Racial slurs, physical harassment, deliberate exclusion. He placed them on the table, each one landing with a soft sound that somehow felt like a hammer blow. He removed another stack. Same incidents, revised versions, filed days or weeks later. Notice how racial harassment becomes misunderstanding, how assault becomes horseplay, how specific documented acts of cruelty are transformed into generic social development challenges. The board secretary's hand was shaking now. Lockage's professional smile had disappeared entirely, replaced by something that looked like panic barely held in check. Brenneman stared at the documents like they were evidence at his own trial. Every revision, Kim Jae-ho said, his voice never rising, never sharpening, maintaining that same conversational tone that somehow made every word land harder, signed by the same person, Arthur Sterling. Sterling surged to his feet. This is a violation of privacy. You can't just... His voice cracked mid-sentence, the confident drawl replaced by something higher, thinner, desperate. Kim Jae-ho turned to look at him. The movement was minimal, just a shift of his head, but it silenced Sterling as effectively as a hand over his mouth. I can. Because I own the cameras. I paid for them, just like I paid for the chairs you're sitting in, the roof over your head, the computers you use to rewrite incident reports, and the salary increases the board approved last quarter using my foundation's discretionary funds. Sterling sat down. The movement was abrupt, graceless, the collapse of a man who had just realized the ground beneath him was gone. Kim Jae-ho returned his attention to the board. Exhibit C. Interviews conducted by Detective David Miller. He gestured to where Miller sat, badge visible, witness to everything. With 3 families who withdrew their children from this school in the past 18 months, all black, all citing racial harassment, all silenced by what they described as administrative pressure. He didn't need to read from the documents. He had them memorized. But he let the board members see them, let them see the names, the dates, the detailed accounts of children who had suffered and parents who had been told, in various polite ways, that the problem was their children, not the system. The parents in the audience were murmuring now, low, angry sounds building like distant thunder. Some were pulling out phones, recording. The reporter in the back was writing so fast her hand was a blur. Exhibit D. Kim Jae-ho placed another document on the table with deliberate precision. A behavioral warning sent to me 3 days ago. Sent, interestingly, 12 hours after I confronted Mr. Sterling about the harassment of my daughter. He let that timing sink in. The warning claims Zola is disruptive, standoffish, refuses to integrate with peers. He clicked a remote. The screen changed. Security footage from the same day as the timestamp on the warning. Zola sitting alone at her table. Zola being surrounded. Zola's lunch being kicked across the floor. Zola sitting motionless, hands gripping the table, while Mr. Sterling scrolled through his phone 5 feet away. This, Kim Jae-ho said, his voice finally taking on an edge that could cut steel, is what disruptive looks like in your institution. Principal Lockage found her voice, though it came out strained, higher than usual. Mr. Kim, I understand you're upset, but these are serious accusations. They're not accusations. Kim Jae-ho's interruption was surgical, removing her words with the precision of a scalpel. They're facts, documented, time-stamped, witnessed, and I'm not finished. The silence that followed was different than before. This wasn't the silence of shock. This was the silence of people watching an execution and realizing they might be next on the scaffold. Kim Jae-ho removed the final document. Exhibit E. Financial records showing that President Brenneman's son, Tyler Brenneman, currently enrolled in 4th grade, has been disciplined 4 times in 2 years for incidents involving racial harassment, physical assault, and intimidation of other students. 4 incidents. 4 documented complaints from 4 different families, all of them Black or Asian families, all of them withdrawn or resolved without consequence. Brenneman exploded out of his chair. You have no right to investigate my family. This is harassment. This is, he sputtered, face now fully red, veins visible in his neck. I have every right. Kim Jae-ho's voice didn't rise to meet Brenneman's. It dropped, becoming quieter, more dangerous. Because your son used your position to escape accountability, because you buried complaints to protect him, because you used my money I gave to help children, to fund a system that protected your child while destroying others. He placed the final document on the table. It landed with a sound like a gavel. Each victim's family was pressured to withdraw their complaints. Each was told their child was too sensitive or unable to adapt. Each was made to feel that the problem was their child, not yours. And when they refused to be silent, their children were pushed out, transferred, withdrawn for disciplinary reasons. The room erupted, parents shouting questions, board members scrambling, talking over each other, pointing at documents, accusations flying. Lockage calling for order, her voice drowned out. Sterling sitting rigid in his chair, staring at nothing. Brenneman standing, shouting something about lawyers, about slander, about how this wouldn't stand. The reporter pushing forward, camera phone out, catching every second. But Kim Jae-ho wasn't done, because the evidence was only step 1. Step 2 was the sentence. Kim Jae-ho raised one hand. The room fell silent, not because he was loud, but because for the first time, they understood who they were dealing with, a man who had toppled empires. And this was just a school board. The silence held for 3 seconds. Then Kim Jae-ho spoke, and his words fell like stones into still water, each one creating ripples that would eventually become waves. Effective immediately, the JH Trust is withdrawing all funding from this institution. That includes the $400,000 annual grant for your STEM program, the $150,000 for your library operations, and the $200,000 discretionary fund you use for what you call facility improvements. He paused, letting the numbers settle over the room like ash. You have 60 days to find replacement funding or begin cutting programs. Lockage's mouth opened and closed, no sound emerging. Her hands fluttered over the papers in front of her like birds with broken wings. Brenneman's face had progressed from red to purple, his voice strangled as he tried to form words. We have contracts. You can't just... I can. Read the contract. Donor withdrawal clause. Section 7, paragraph 3. The trust retains the right to cease funding at any time for any reason deemed contrary to the trust's mission. Your systematic abuse of children qualifies. Kim Jae-ho's voice remained level, conversational, devastating in its calm. The board secretary was frantically typing on her laptop, probably pulling up the contract, her face growing paler with each line she read. 2 board members were whispering urgently to each other, their expressions moving through denial to panic to something approaching despair. However, Kim Jae-ho continued, and the word hung in the air like a blade. I'm not abandoning the children of Savannah. I'm simply redirecting my investment to a system that will actually protect them. He clicked the remote. A new image appeared on the screen. Architectural renderings. A modern building, all glass and light and open spaces that looked nothing like the institutional dreariness of the current school. The murmuring in the crowd changed tone, confusion giving way to dawning understanding. I have purchased the 12-acre lot adjacent to this school. Construction on a new charter institution begins in 30 days. Enrollment opens in 60. Tuition will be free for any family who has experienced discrimination at a Savannah County public school. He let that sink in, watching as parents in the audience pulled out phones, started texting, the information spreading in real time. I have already received 43 applications. The board members stared at the rendering like it was a death sentence. Because it was. A competing school, well-funded, specifically designed to attract the families this institution had failed, the families they had driven away, the families who would now have an alternative. Kim Jae-ho turned away from the board, addressing the parents directly. His body language shifted, opening up, becoming less formal. This wasn't a businessman speaking to bureaucrats anymore. This was a father speaking to other parents. If your child has been silenced, ignored, or retaliated against by this administration, I am offering you an alternative. Not because I want to destroy this school. He gestured to the board without looking at them. But because you deserve a system that protects your children instead of protecting its reputation. The applause started in the back row. Scattered at first, then building. Parents standing, some with tears streaming down their faces. A black mother near the front clutched her daughter, maybe 8 years old, and nodded at Kim Jae-ho with an expression that held both gratitude and grief for battles she'd fought alone. Sterling surged to his feet again, his earlier confidence completely shattered, replaced by something approaching hysteria. This is insane. You can't just, this is extortion. Kim Jae-ho turned back to face him. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. No, Mr. Sterling, extortion is what you did to Zola when you sent that behavioral warning to her file the same day you watched her be assaulted and did nothing. What I'm doing is called accountability. Detective Miller stood from his seat. The movement was unhurried, deliberate, his badge catching the fluorescent light. He walked down the aisle, each footstep echoing in the sudden silence. He stopped next to Sterling, and his voice carried the flat professional tone of someone who had done this 1,000 times. Mr. Sterling, I'm going to need you to come with me. We have some questions about your involvement in the falsification of school records and potential civil rights violations. Sterling's face went through every emotion simultaneously. Shock, anger, fear, denial. You can't be serious. I was just... His voice cracked. He looked to Brenneman for support. Brenneman looked away. The betrayal was immediate, absolute. Brenneman turned to Lockage instead, his voice sharp with desperation. This is your responsibility. You're the principal. You should have been monitoring. My responsibility? Lockage's professional veneer finally cracked completely. You pressured me to bury those reports. You told me to protect Tyler. You said... I said nothing. Brenneman's shout echoed off the walls. I suggested nothing. If you made administrative decisions based on enough. Kim Jae-ho's single word cut through the chaos like a knife through silk. Both Lockage and Brenneman fell silent. The time for deflecting blame to subordinates is over. The records show your involvement, Mr. Brenneman, your personal emails, your phone calls to the superintendent's office, your threats to withhold board support unless problem families were managed. He said it without heat, just presenting facts. Detective Miller has all of it. Miller nodded once, confirming. His hand was on Sterling's elbow now, gentle but firm, the universal cop gesture that said cooperation was the only option. Sterling allowed himself to be led toward the door, his earlier swagger replaced by a stumbling gait. Parents moved aside to let them pass, some glaring, one spitting at his feet. The reporter captured every moment. Lockage was frantically shuffling papers, her voice climbing toward panic. I'm calling an emergency recess. We need to consult legal counsel. You need to listen. Kim Jae-ho's voice stopped her mid-sentence. He placed both hands on the podium, leaning forward slightly, and for the first time all night, his carefully controlled expression showed something underneath. Not anger. Something colder. More final. I didn't come here as a businessman. I didn't come here as a donor. I came here as a father. His voice carried to every corner of the room. And I'm leaving here knowing that my daughter will never again have to pray for invisibility in a place that should have protected her. The silence that followed was different than all the previous silences. This one held weight, meaning. The kind of silence that comes after a truth so fundamental that argument becomes impossible. Then someone in the back row stood and started clapping. Not the polite applause of civic meetings. Real applause, loud and sustained. Others joined. More stood. Not the board members. Not the teachers who had looked away. But the parents. The ones who had watched their children suffer. The ones who had been told they were overreacting, too sensitive, unable to adapt. The standing ovation built like a wave, filling the room with a sound that was part gratitude, part grief, part vindication. Some were crying openly now, others were nodding, faces set in expressions that suggested they'd been waiting for someone to say these things for years. Kim Jae-ho gathered his folder, nodded once to the room, and walked toward the exit. Detective Miller was outside with Sterling. The reporter tried to intercept him with questions. He walked past all of it to his car, alone, the sounds of the meeting hall erupting behind him in a chaos he'd created and no longer needed to witness. But the real moment wasn't in that boardroom. It was happening 3 miles away, where Zola Jae-ho sat in her room, unaware that her father had just burned down an empire for her. And when he came home that night, she asked him one question that made everything worth it. I'm going to finish this story in a moment, but I need you to hear me. If you've made it this far, you've invested more than 1 hour of your life in Zola's journey. That means something. So I'm asking, please, like this video and subscribe to the channel. I spend weeks researching and writing these stories, and when people watch and don't subscribe, it genuinely hurts. I want to keep making these, but I can't do it without you. Drop a comment telling me what you think Kim Jae-ho should do next. Build the school, stay and fight, your voice matters. Now, let's see what Zola asked her father. Kim Jae-ho pulled into his driveway at 9:47 p.m. The house lights were on. Zola was awake, sitting on the stairs in her pajamas, clutching her favorite blanket. And when he walked through the door, she looked at him and asked, "Yup." The front door closed behind Kim Jae-ho with a soft click that sounded impossibly loud in the stillness of his house. He'd expected darkness, expected Zola to be asleep, safe in the oblivion of childhood rest, unaware of the war he just waged in her name. Instead, every light on the first floor was on, and his daughter sat on the stairs in her purple pajamas, the ones with the stars, clutching her favorite blanket, the soft yellow one she'd had since her first night in this house. Her eyes were red, swollen. She'd been crying. Kim Jae-ho's exhaustion evaporated, replaced by immediate alarm. He crossed the foyer in 3 strides, dropping to one knee in front of her, hands hovering near her shoulders but not touching, waiting for permission. "What's wrong? Did something happen at school today?" Zola looked at him, and her expression was so complex it took him a moment to parse it. Not fear, not pain. Something he hadn't seen in weeks. Something that looked almost like wonder. "Appa, why didn't you tell me?" Confusion replaced alarm. "Tell you what, sweetheart?" Mrs. Henderson called. Zola's voice was thick, words coming out in uneven bursts between shaky breaths. Mrs. Henderson, one of the parents from the meeting, a black woman whose daughter had transferred out last year. "She said you're building a new school. She said you stood up in front of everyone and fought for me." Kim Jae-ho's throat tightened. He'd planned to tell her tomorrow, had wanted to have the right words prepared, had needed time to figure out how to explain what he'd done without making it sound like the system was so broken that her father had to dismantle it by force. "I was going to." "She said you told everyone what happened to me, that you showed them, that you made them see." Zola's face crumpled and the tears came. Not the silent, controlled tears she'd learned to hide. Real tears, the kind that came from a place so deep they couldn't be stopped or managed. Relief tears. The kind that come from years of holding everything in and finally being allowed to let go. Kim Jae-ho didn't ask permission this time. He sat on the stairs beside her and pulled her close, and Zola collapsed into him like a building whose supports had finally given out. She sobbed into his shoulder, her small body shaking with the force of it, making sounds that broke his heart because they were the sounds of a child who had been holding up the world and could finally put it down. He held her, didn't try to stop the tears, didn't tell her it was okay, just held her while she cried out weeks of silent suffering, months of prayers for invisibility, years of learning to make herself small. His own eyes burned, but he didn't look away. This was his to witness. His to hold. When the sobs finally slowed to hiccups, when her breathing started to even out, Zola pulled back enough to look at him. Her face was blotchy, nose running, eyes puffy. She'd never looked more beautiful. "I thought I was the problem, Appa." Her voice was raw, scraped clean by tears. "I thought if I was just better, quieter, whiter, then maybe they'd stop. Maybe they'd like me. Maybe I could be normal." The word hit him like a physical blow. Normal. The word she'd used to ask him to cut her hair. The word that meant erasure. "Zola, look at me. Really look at me. He waited until her eyes met his, red-rimmed and exhausted, but holding a spark of something that looked like hope. You are not the problem. You have never been the problem, and anyone who made you feel that way doesn't deserve to be in your world. But what if the new school doesn't work? The fear was still there, underneath the relief. Old fears don't disappear with one victory. What if they come there too? What if it's me? Then I will build another school, and another, and another. His voice was steady, absolute, until you have a place where you don't have to be brave, where you can just be 9, where you can be loud or quiet or silly or serious or whatever you want to be that day, where the only thing you have to worry about is math homework and whether you want dumplings or kimbap for lunch. Zola laughed, a watery sound that was half sob, half giggle. Appa, will you still make me dumplings for lunch? Every single day. He tucked a loose braid behind her ear, gentle now, and she didn't flinch. And if anyone has a problem with it, they can take it up with me. Zola smiled. Not the practiced smile she'd been wearing for weeks, not the fake brightness she used to hide her pain. A real smile, the kind that reached her eyes and made them crinkle at the corners, the kind that reminded him why he'd left Seoul, why he'd adopted her, why he'd burned down 1,000 institutions if it meant she could smile like that every day. She leaned against him, her head on his shoulder, the blanket wrapped around both of them now. They sat there on the stairs, not talking, just breathing together. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked away seconds that felt like healing. That night, Zola slept through without waking. No nightmares, no whispered prayers for invisibility, just peace. But the real test would come the next morning, when she had to decide whether to go back to her old school or wait for the new one. And what she chose would tell Kim Jae-ho everything he needed to know about whether he had saved her or just delayed the damage. The next morning, the sun rose over Savannah like it always did. But in the Jae-ho household, something had fundamentally changed, and it started with the sound of humming. Kim Jae-ho woke to a sound he hadn't heard in 6 weeks, humming. Not the nervous, barely audible hum of someone trying to convince themselves everything was fine. Real humming. Unself-conscious melody floating up from the kitchen, the kind of sound a child makes when they feel safe enough to forget they're being watched. He lay still for a moment, eyes closed, listening, confirming it was real. That he wasn't imagining it in the desperate way grief makes you hallucinate the return of things you've lost. But no, there it was. A tuneless, wandering song punctuated by the sounds of the refrigerator opening, the clink of dishes, the familiar rhythms of morning in a house that had been silent for too long. When he came downstairs, still in his pajamas, hair uncombed, she was already there, already awake, already dressed in the yellow dress with the sunflowers, the one she'd stopped wearing 3 weeks ago because someone had said it looked too bright. Her lunchbox sat open on the counter, and she was packing it herself with the precision he recognized, the ritual she'd abandoned when the world became too dangerous to be herself in. Dumplings, the pork and chive ones he'd made yesterday, stored in the fridge in the blue container she could reach herself. Kimchi in the small compartment that sealed tight so the smell wouldn't leak. Strawberries on the left side, cut into hearts. Blueberries on the right, exactly the way she used to arrange them, never touching, because order was how she controlled a world that felt chaotic. Kim Jae-ho stood in the doorway, not interrupting, just watching, bearing witness to resurrection. She sensed him there the way children always know when they're being observed. Looked up, and her face broke into a smile that made his chest tight. Morning, Appa. Can you braid my hair today? I want the fancy one, with the beads. The beads. The purple ones. The ones she'd asked him to take out 2 weeks ago because they clicked too loud and people stared. She wanted them back. 20 minutes later, she sat on the kitchen stool while his fingers worked through her hair with the practiced ease of 2 years of YouTube tutorials and early morning rituals. But this time was different. This time she talked. Told him about the book she was reading, something about dragons and girls who learned they were more powerful than they'd been taught to believe. Asked if they could get peach cobbler after school from that bakery on Bull Street, the one where the owner always gave her extra whipped cream. Are you going back to school today? He asked, weaving the final braid, securing it with the purple beads that caught the morning light. Or do you want to stay home until the new one opens? She was quiet for a moment, considering. He could see her face in the mirror on the wall, the way her expression shifted through thoughts thoughts too complex for 9 years old. When she answered, her voice was steady. I'm going back, just for a little while, because I want them to see me. See you? He finished the braid, his hands resting gently on her shoulders. She turned to face him, and her eyes held something he hadn't seen since the cafeteria, but transformed. Not the terror of being seen, the power of choosing to be visible. Yeah, I want them to see the girl whose dad built her a school. I want them to see that I'm not invisible. I never was. The drive to school felt different. Zola sat in the passenger seat, a rare privilege she'd requested, sitting up straight not because she was bracing for battle, but because she was proud. Her lunchbox sat on her lap, visible, unapologetic. She pointed out houses they passed, resuming the game she used to play where she made up stories about the people who lived there. When they pulled into the school parking lot, Kim Jae-ho did something he'd never done before. I'm walking you in. You don't have to. I know, I want to. He stepped out of the car, came around to her side, and offered his hand. She took it. They walked through the parking lot together, and Kim Jae-ho felt the weight of eyes on them. Other parents staring, whispering. But the quality of the whispers had changed, not judgment, something closer to awe. Some parents nodded at him. One mother, black, her daughter holding her hand with a grip that looked like Zola's used to look, mouthed the words, "Thank you." He nodded back. Inside the building, the difference was immediate. Mr. Val Sterling's classroom had a substitute teacher, a young woman with kind eyes who smiled at Zola when they passed. On the board outside his room, a formal notice. Mr. Arthur Sterling on administrative leave, pending investigation by the Savannah County School District and the State Board of Education. Zola read it, squeezed her father's hand, kept walking. At the entrance to the third-grade hallway, she stopped, turned to face him. I love you, Appa. I love you too, my queen. And remember, she finished his sentence, the promise they'd made 2 years ago, the one she'd forgotten in the weeks of survival, the one that was hers again now. I bow to no one. Never, he confirmed. She hugged him. Quick, fierce, the hug of a child who knows she's loved but has places to be and people to see. Then she turned and walked down the hallway, her braids swinging with each step, purple beads clicking softly, a sound that announced her presence without apology. Kim Jae-ho watched until she disappeared around the corner. Not a soldier marching to war, just a 9-year-old girl going to learn. 3 months later, the new Savannah Charter Academy opened with 127 students. Mr. Sterling was terminated and remained under investigation by the State Board of Education for civil rights violations and falsification of official records. President Brenneman resigned from the school board, citing personal reasons. Principal Lockage accepted early retirement, and Zola Jae-ho? She still packed dumplings for lunch, but now she had 3 friends who asked her to teach them how to use chopsticks, who traded their sandwiches for her kimbap, who asked her to braid their hair the way her appa braided hers. Kim Jae-ho sat in his car in the school parking lot, engine off, watching the doors where his daughter had disappeared. His phone buzzed. A text from Detective Miller. The other families are filing a class action suit. You started something. He didn't reply, just smiled. Not the cold smile from Seoul, the one that meant someone's world was about to end, but the smile of a father who kept his promise, who showed his daughter that the world bends to people who refuse to break, that invisibility is not survival, that being seen, really seen, in all your difference and beauty and power is not a curse, it's a right. He started the car and drove home to prepare tomorrow's dumplings. Thank you for staying with me through Zola and Kim Jae-ho's story. I know it was long, but some stories deserve the full telling. If this moved you, if you felt Zola's pain, Kim Jae-ho's rage, or the relief of that final morning, please, I'm begging you, like this video and subscribe. I put weeks of my life into this, and it genuinely breaks my heart when thousands of people watch and only a handful subscribe. Your support is what allows me to keep telling these stories. Drop a comment with the moment that hit you hardest. Was it the cafeteria scene, the school board takedown, the final breakfast? I read every single one. Thank you for being here. Until the next story.